Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome, everyone, to Project Management Office Hours, the #1 live project management radio show in the U.S., broadcasting to you from the Phoenix Business Radio X studios in Tempe, Arizona. I'm your host, PMO Joe, and for the next hour, we'll be talking project management with our special guests. I also want to say thank you to our sponsor, the PMO Squad. They are the premier provider of project management talent, training, and services across the United States. Visit www.thepmosquad.com to learn more about all of their services, including the purpose-driven PMO. Just want to acknowledge, right, we're a project management radio show, and today is International Project Management Day, so how appropriate to be broadcasting live. And with that, a reminder that IIL, for the 16th consecutive year, has an online conference that's available for everybody to register. If you go out to IIL.com, go to the 2019 online conference for International Project Management Day, you'll be able to register. And if you are a veteran, service member, or military spouse, during the registration, you can use promo code VPMMA and register for free. So we're very proud of that partnership with IAL to get a free registration out of that. If you're a civilian like me, you're able to use promo code PMO Squad and get $10 off the registration. The conference starts today, and it runs for 90 days, so you'll have plenty of time from the comfort of your own home to get all the great content and listen to the speakers. So I encourage everybody to go out there and celebrate. Now, with that, we are so excited today to have with us our special guests, Rich Maltzman, Jim Stewart, and Janelle Lee. Welcome, everybody.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Greetings.
Rich, if you would take a moment, please introduce yourself to the listeners and get our show going.
Glad to do so, and happy International PM Day, something I've been involved with, actually, for quite a while. I got the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to declare International PM Month, November International PM Month, a couple of years ago, so we multiplied that by 30. So by way of introduction, Rich Maltzman. I am a senior lecturer at Boston University, coming to you live from the shores of the River Charles. I won't dwell on that too long, but I've got about 40 years in industry and a parallel career in teaching and writing project management books with outstanding other project managers like the great James Stewart, who will introduce himself next.
Yeah, Jim, please say hello.
Well, I'm hardly worthy of that, Rich. Thanks, Rich. Jim Stewart here. I've been doing project management for about 25 years, independent since 2003. Past 5 or 6 years, been getting heavily into Agile and a bunch of certifications. I won't go into all that. In both traditional and Agile project management. My sweet spot is consulting, training, and mentoring. And in fact, Joe had positioned to us an organization that allows one to mentor veterans, and Joe, you'll be happy to know I am mentoring a veteran through that organization. We've been in that relationship for about the past month or so. He's a United States Air Force guy, and he's working at one of the contractors over in Iraq. And I'm hoping to try to help him transition from that into project management. The last thing I'll say is I'm focusing currently on agile transformations for companies who want them. Along with Rich, I'm on a board of an organization called Mind Edge, which is training. And we have co-written a book we're going to talk somewhat about facilitating project planning meetings. And that's the very short nutshell of that.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And then here in studio with us, we have Janelle Lee. Hello, Janelle.
Hi, I'm Janelle Lee. I'm a director of project management for a Fortune 500 financial technology company in Phoenix. I've been in project management about 15 years and director roles for about 10 years. And I'm PMP and PMI ACP certified.
It's fantastic. Such a great mix of knowledge and experience on the show today. Really looking forward to that. And Jim, thanks for the mentorship within VPMMA. That's very much appreciated. I failed to mention that myself and the other co-founder, Eric Wright, are presenters during International Project Management Day at IIL. So if you register and go out to the site, you'll be able to see our presentation to learn more about VPMMA and how you too can be a mentor and help the organization and our veterans. So let's jump into it. Let's talk some project management. And I guess we'll start. Both Jim and Rich, you guys had alluded to a book. What is that book? And tell us a little bit about it.
I'll start. So the book is called How to Facilitate Productive Project Planning Meetings. A very descriptive title, and it is a how-to book. It's a paperback. It's very accessible and inexpensive. Subtitle is A Practical Guide to Ensuring Project Success, with the idea being that we kind of, unfortunately, end up living on meetings. So if they don't go well, that means communication doesn't go well. We all know that communications is 89.3265% of project management, or some number close to that. So we've taken on meetings and realizing that they're kind of, they can be a waste of time if they're not done well. And they can be fantastic if they are done well. We aimed this book specifically at that, using a lot of experience. Jim and I have both sat through many meetings, too many to count. And we also surveyed a lot of project managers out there because of our networks. We're pretty well networked and got a lot of great war stories. These things really happened, and here's how you might avoid them. Jim, you want to add anything else about the book?
What I was going to say was that this book is also on a Kindle version. And what we discovered, too, is that there's more interest than either Rich or I thought. It's very much of a nuts and bolts how-to book, how to run a meeting. And here we are, 1 year later, still talking about it. Every time we speak about it somewhere, somebody else wants to hear about it. So that nuts and bolts need for doing a project and running a meeting is still very much there, no matter what size organization.
And Janelle, I would imagine as a director of a PMO that meetings are incorporated throughout your day in a book such as this would be beneficial and informative to you as well.
Oh, absolutely. The thing I like the most about the book is focusing on the value and vision on a project. I think as project managers, we tend to lose that. We get focused in the day-to-day issues and tasks to be done. We don't consistently remind the team of the vision and value of the project that they're bringing.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You talk about value, right? And project management for so long has been scope and budget and timeline, but there seems to be a shift in the industry now moving towards value as a measure for project success. What's been your experience, Janelle, with that?
Absolutely. So defining a scope and a budget and staying on scope, budget, time is great if you're delivering something that's actually going to be used by the client. So the best way to measure project success is not necessarily whether a project is on time or budget. It's whether the project delivers value to the business and to the customer.
And, Jim and Rich, as you guys aren't just authors of a book, right? You're long-term practitioners out there in the field. What are you seeing related to value as a measure as opposed to just scope and time and budget?
I'd like to jump in on that one. I think Janelle is spot on. And I think one of the issues we had with traditional waterfall, now not the damn waterfall because I've been a practitioner for a long time, I still do it, but the emphasis on value wasn't quite there as much. Whereas in Agile, at the end of every sprint, which can be a couple of weeks, we're reprioritizing the backlog for business value. The product owner is doing this in alignment with the team and with the business. So there's a real focus on it from moment to moment, whereas I didn't see that so much before. And I think that's affected both sides of the house. That's my initial thought on it.
Yeah, and I'll add to it as well that this idea of benefits realization, which is a fancy way of saying what Janelle called accurately value, and providing lasting value for a project manager, that's become a big trend. Separately, different couple of books I've co-authored on green project management, which is a terrible name. It really should be sustainability in PM, thinks about sustained value, economic, ecological, and social value. And I don't want to go off on that tangent because Jim knows that we'll take the rest of the call. But I do want to say that there is a huge increase in interest in this idea of continuing to focus on scope, time, and cost, right? That's still important. But with the extra check-in, and Agile does a good job of that, I say check-in, is this delivering continuing, ongoing, steady state value to the company and other stakeholders? I just came back from a talk in Milan where I addressed all 3 chapters of PMI Italy, a pretty straightforward division there, North, Central, and South. And in that talk, there were 700 attendees, and there was a great reception for this. And it's good to see that PMI is working this into its conferences. This was themed around sustainability. And I can tell you that it's going into the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide because I'm working on that. I can't tell you much more, or I will have to go through some kind of congressional investigation. but this is a big deal in what's changing in project management. So be ready.
And I think it changes our role as project leaders and project managers. We traditionally think about project ending, and we've done our lessons learned, and we're complete. And really, our role has changed to continuing through the life cycle of that product and making sure we have truly delivered value on that project. Our role no longer ends when a project ends.
Yeah, and I think
that's right.
The interesting component of that, right, and tying all the stuff up is I see Dr. Kersner wrote the foreword on your book. Dr. Kersner was the morning kickoff presentation for International Project Management Day today, and his discussion was on benefits and value, and talking about how Agile gets us more immediate value realization because we're doing the sprint-based as opposed to waterfall, which is at the end when the product's finished. So you guys all summarized Dr. Kersner's presentation today. I'm sure he's happy that you did that.
There you go.
So we talked a little bit about the book and what's it about, but how did you guys come to write the book, right? What happened that you said, hey, I think we're going to write a book?
Well, I think Rich knows I'm going to go with that one. So here's the deal. Rich and I have known each other for a number of years. We're pretty good friends. We live about 15 minutes from each other. We worked on a lot of stuff, writing PMP questions and you name it, doing projects, etc. So Rich had written a couple of books already, and I hadn't written one with him. I was looking as an independent. They're always saying it's kind of like the professors, publish or perish. So in terms of being an independent, they're always saying write a book. It's good collateral. So I had another friend who was a project manager, also a professor at Brandeis University. And we were talking at lunch, and I said, I'm trying to think of a book. He said, you know those meetings you run, those big meetings you're doing largely at pharmaceutical? I said, yeah. He said, I'd read that book. I said, okay. So I approached Rich with the idea, and after some discussion about it, he said, yeah, that sounds interesting. And so to make a long story short, we got to work on it, found a publisher, and we're off to the races. But it was really those particular meetings I was doing, and I know Rich was doing them in another fashion. That was the genesis of the book.
That's right. My background is telecom, and we had similar 2-day kickoff meetings. And they went splendidly well once we got good at it. We had a template for it, and we had meaningful results of these meetings. And let me step back. I think Janelle kind of talked about this already, and that is, as project manager, we're done, folks. Right? We want stuff done on time. We want that to be exactly what the customer wants. But you know what? We tend to fail, or at least a little bit more poorly at our own stuff. The shoemaker's son has no shoes. We often do not project manage our meetings too well. We don't set them up. We don't have an agenda. We don't understand how to better facilitate them. And that's what that's basically the underlying theme of this book, is that project meetings are mini projects. Let's manage them that way. Let's make sure that there's a communications plan of sorts for them. And let's make sure that people understand who's supposed to be there, why they're there, what they'll be presenting, and even risk management. Projects are full of risks, opportunities, and threats, and so are meetings. And one of the things we write about in the book are meeting goblins, little threats that show up in our meeting, like I'm doing right now, being a little bit too garrulous. So I'm going to stop. But that's an example of one of the other ways we can project manage our meetings, look at threats.
You had mentioned Jim Brandeis, and Rich, you had mentioned Boston University. So for those who don't know, right, you're coming to us live from Boston. And as a lifelong Boston Red Sox fan, I'll just jump and say, hey, what's going on? Are we going to sign Mookie Betts, or are we going to trade him? What's the word in Boston telling us these days?
The last, with the problem they have, without getting too wonky about it, is they're up against their salary cap. So they're trying to decide, should we keep him or not keep him? But my philosophy is, if they had thought about that when they got Ortiz and had traded him because they didn't have the money, look where we'd be. So I don't know what they're going to do. But, I would just blow through the salary cap, pay the penalty, and be done with it.
Everyone in Boston wants to keep him. I think one of the newscasts last night, Channel 5 newscast last night, since we're in the media here, they actually started to pass a hat around and collect cash.
That's extreme, but okay.
It's a little extreme.
Yeah. Well, I'll throw my $2 in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's help the poor, right? Help the poor.
Yeah.
He needs another $15 million.
Right.
Show him some respect.
And Janelle, talking a little outside the ranks of project management, you have some interests as well that you support and volunteer for.
I do. Yes.
I believe one is Maggie's Place.
Yes. So Maggie's Place provides homes for homeless pregnant women or women who have just had a baby, and it's a great community. They help these women become self-sufficient, and I volunteer there regularly. Bring donations to them and support their house. It's a great organization. It's maggiesplace.org.
So we have the extremes, right? We can help Mookie Betts, who only made $23 million last year, and we can cheer for him because he's our favorite team, or we can make a difference in someone's life by really going out to help those who need it, right, at maggiesplace.org.
I just shifted my $2 over to Maggie's Place. Very good work, Janelle, seriously.
All right, so we sidetrack there for a little person because, hey, we're people, right? And the reality of project management is the good ones, or the great ones, rather, understand who we are as people and can interact at a personal level. So I always like to get to know the guests a little bit more than just as a name and a face on a book or in person. So Janelle, going back to your role within as a PMO director, right? Large organization, you're running the show over there. What's the PMO's responsibility for organizational transformation, right? Projects by definition are all unique endeavors, right? That are change agents.
Right. So really every project is a change agent in one way or another, but the PMO is shifting as well to be less project focused, be more product focused and value focused, and that includes the organizational transformation. We talked about agile transformation, and PMOs are at the ground floor of that, so they need to really guide their teams through those transformations, from waterfall to agile or any other iteration of that.
Yeah, we do the PMO squad. We have our main service is called the Purpose Driven PMO. And we've rebranded it from PMO, being usually Project Management Office, to Purpose, Measure, Optimize, where the theme of the PMO should be on what the business needs, not what we as project managers want to measure and govern.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it fits right in with the waterfall to agile, or agile to waterfall, or combination, iterative, whatever it may be. Find your purpose, and then you can go do your transformation.
Right. And for the record, PMO is a terrible term. We should all change it to delivery or value, service, something. We should get together and decide what we want to call PMO.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, although that said, I have a question for Janelle, if I may.
Yeah.
So interesting. I look at her perspective on this. Where I am, I'm working at a company. By the way, my background's in IT, and I'm working at a cybersecurity company. And when I came in, there's a woman working there who I know from serving on the same board that Rich and I do, coincidentally. She's a dyed-in-the-wool agilist. She has never done a waterfall. And I was brought there to start a PMO, and she really argue with me why would even need a PMO. From an Agilist point of view, there was no need because they're so decentralized. And I've discovered in some PMOs, they don't necessarily, from their perspective, support Agile or on board with it. So I wonder, am I seeing a skewed vision of the world? Is this what you folks are seeing, Janelle is seeing, or what's your take on that? Agile, is the PMO accepting of the Agilists? Are the Agilists accepting of PMOs?
I think if you go back to the value that the project organization delivers, we do bring value to the Agile process. We don't necessarily have to be Scrum Masters, but we can make sure that what they're delivering, even on an iterative basis, is providing value, is moving forward. We're removing roadblocks. So to say that you're no longer valuable because we're Agile is a misconception.
And I'm going to probably oversimplify this and have 1,000 spears thrown at me. But if we change our accounting practice from cash to accrual, there'd still be value in the accounting department.
Right.
And that's kind of the comparison that I like to make, right? It doesn't matter the technique you use, it's the value you provide.
Right.
Absolutely. And I agree with that. Both of what you're saying is just the attitude I've run into from some people. One woman both Rich and I both know, she runs a PMO but has no time for Agile. And this other gal that I know working at the place is like, well, why do I need a PMO? So I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying I'm seeing some of that, at least out here, that's sort of like a bit of oil in water, and I don't know what's causing that.
Well, I think part of it is perception. So when you say PMO, people are thinking of very heavy process, very heavy rigor. So if you can provide what value you would bring in an Agile organization, it solves that problem.
Yeah.
I think VDO, we should be VDOs, right? Value Delivery Organization. And you're done.
Yeah, and that's why we came up with the purpose-driven PMO, right? Is if you're a PMO leader at company X, you may have run a project management office. You then move to a new career at company Y, and maybe they have a program management office. Both called PMOs, both different meanings, but the organization reacts to them with one name. So we rebrand as purpose. You define what it is. Are you agile? Are you traditional? Are you project? Are you program? And then the measure and optimize component to that ties into the value, right? Are you providing value? And are we optimizing to ensure we're hitting that value?
I remember reading about PMOs when I first started in that work, because that's been the last 20 years of my career. I've also been in the PMO, more in the area of certification, career management, career path, so on the softer side, if you will, of the PMO. But in this book, and I think you get a kick out of this, they had a spectrum. On one side of the spectrum was a Quaker, and on the other side of the spectrum was Attila the Hun. And they said PMOs run the gamut from Quaker to Attila, meaning that some are directive, as Janelle said, process heavy. This is the way thou shalt run your projects, with templates and strict guidelines or even laws about the policies about the way you run projects. And the Quaker, who's there to help you and perhaps prepare some oats for you.
I like the comparison. It certainly gives the visual, right, to the discussion. I love that.
And Joe, you hit on an interesting thing, maybe backed into it, which is what I've discovered in my years in project management is the lack of standardization from one organization to another. So if we were all electricians or plumbers, we would have codes we'd work by and go from one place to another and do it pretty much the same way. I can walk into any 10 organizations across this country. One calls their PMO, does X. One calls the Center of Excellence, does Y. One uses Microsoft Project, another one uses Excel and Word. It's just like it's all made up. It's like an immaturity model of from 1 to 5. Most of them are hovering about 1.5 ad hoc, and everything else is thrown up into the air. So this is part of the problem too. There's an accepted standard, which is the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, and Scrum has their own. I've even gone to meetings where people say, I'm not sure if I'm the product owner or if I'm the Scrum Master. So it's weird because we have standards, but nobody ever reads those standards or follows. I'm exaggerating when I say nobody. It gets frustrating because people don't really have this. We have these codes and these standards, but they don't get followed nearly as much, and a lot of it is a seat of the pants. That's my rant for the day.
Yeah, it makes it difficult for us in the academic world to try to teach what is a PMO when I know, and as we'd say in Boston, in my hat, that varies significantly. So what I do is I talk about Attila the Hun and the Quaker, and I talk about my own experience. I try to make it practical, but I do advise them that you'll find very different work if you're going to become a PMO leader or a PMO team member. Usually that's where they're starting. You don't jump right up to Janelle. But you're probably going to find a quite different environment, but I'll try to at least cover some of the differences that I've seen in my career.
Well, and I think to tie into Jim's comments, right, there is a PMBOK and there is definitions of the Agile Manifesto, et cetera, but there isn't a book, a BOK, a body of knowledge of strictly for PMOs. Right, it's a
there are people working on that. So if you check, I can't remember all the names of the folks involved, but there's a group in the UK. Lindsay Scott, I know, is one of the folks, and there's another person named Americo.
Pinto.
I can't remember, but there are several groups that are struggling, but trying to do so and get some standards outlined.
Yes, I agree, and I know actually Lindsay's going to be on our show next year. In America, I'm speaking at the PMO Trends Conference in December, so you're familiar with both of them and agree there's folks that are out there doing it, but nothing is accepted yet, right?
Exactly. They need to gain some traction, so you're right.
Yep. So, tying into that, right, is IT is evolving too, right? I mean, we've got stuff like DevOps and DevSecOps and lean methodologies. Janelle, I mean, how does that play into how a PMO operates?
Really, when you think about those things, you have to think about how your roles and responsibilities have been blurred. So there's no longer that clear definition of a developer, a tester, somebody who implements code in production. Those lines are blurring. So if you think about it at a project scale, it's very difficult to pinpoint one person is responsible for this task. You need to go to that more decentralized model and have team collaboration and understand who's going to do what within each project, because it will change with DevSecOps. Lean goes a lot towards that value delivery. So we need to be asking not just what the value is of the project, but every single process that we do in project management, in development. What are the areas of waste that we can remove and create a frictionless implementation? And I would say we talk about standards. We have 44 standards, and we're talking about we're not following those standards. I would say why? If we're not following those standards, there's probably a reason, and there's no value in following those standards. So maybe the standards need to change.
Or even sometimes people don't even know their standards. Like I said, when I teach a lot of PMP and whatnot. People never heard of the PMBOK. You'll be astounded. And I taught last week and again next week in PMP. I always ask for a show of hands. Who here is using Agile or has heard of it? Usually out of a class of 15 people, 2 are using it. The rest have sort of heard of it and have no clue. So, and then on the PMBOK side, God, when they see that, they're like, oh, there's a book like this? So I think it's not well understood in that context. And taking a step further, when I was talking about the maturity, 2 things to say about that. One, and I wasn't just thinking of PMO maturity, I was thinking of project maturity throughout the organization. But having come from IT, you may also be surprised or not to find out that the most mature from a project point of view in most organizations is IT, whether that's because there's a certain mindset or because they run so many projects, I'm not sure, but it tends to be IT can be very well run project-wise, and from there it's sort of all downhill inside of an organization. I'm generalizing, but that's my overall view from being in a lot of organizations.
Jim, you had mentioned the feedback you get from your training sessions. I'm curious with you and Rich both, what have you guys learned about people who've read your book? What's the feedback you get on that of what people take away?
When I teach, I've been largely teaching for a funny story, a third party, so I can't mention the book. I can't even bring it up. But ironically, a woman came in and said, "I have your book," and it turned out some guy at Northeastern was recommending that we didn't even know, so the word was getting out. So I don't know. I can't answer that question because I'm in a compromised situation where I can't even bring it up. We have good reviews on Yelp and or I should say on what do we have? What do they do online? We have them online. The heck, is it Yelp? I forget.
Amazon.
There you go.
Yeah,
Amazon. Right.
Right.
Our restaurant gets good reviews on Yelp.
Right. Yes. We run meetings while but no, I don't have any personal. I have some personal feedback, but not a lot.
We have direct feedback from our PD day. So let's talk about that for a second. So we gave a talk at PMI Mass Bay. Actually, was it New England? Was that the one that they combined with other chapters, right?
Yeah,
In any case, we gave a presentation there, which was very interactive. So we talked for a while. We got to demonstrate in real time some of the things that happened because the projector failed right in the middle of our talk. And one of the things we talk about is how to deal with technical issues. So that was kind of fun. But we also did an exercise, a table by table exercise where folks simulated a meeting at each table. And there were about, 50 people, I think, 60, something like that. Very good feedback from that real time, I think fairly realistic exercise where they were brainstorming at WBS. One person at each of the tables was given, everyone got a little card that gave them their roles, project manager, team member, but one person, and we haven't talked about this yet, but one person was intentionally one of our goblins, someone who's disruptive in some way at the meeting. And so we saw how each of these teams dealt with the goblin, and people love being the goblin, right? They love being Tina the tangent taker, for example. So we got great feedback from that exercise, and I think that there would be a demand to do that exercise for others because it's learning by doing, which is which I now know after teaching thousands of students, that is the way to go.
So a common thing that I run into with books, right, is how do I practically take the information in a book and apply it to my career, job, profession, life in some way? Is this one of those books that a PM can walk away after reading it and actually go apply what he or she read?
I think so. That was the whole purpose. Rich will agree with me on this. He tends to lean more academic than me. He wanted to have all footnotes and we do this? Can we do that? So Rich, let's just keep it at the practitioner level. So what we recommend is it's a couple hundred pages of a softbound book. Read through it first, and they can actually take it and use it to help them run the meeting. But it also, actually, an analogy just popped in my head. When I teach Agile, I talk about not just the sprints and everything, but also the Agile mindset. So we want them to not only understand how to run a meeting, but get into the leadership mindset. I tell them, you're large and in charge. And in fact, when we're having the meeting and we're in front of them, I've taken a saying, if you can't do what I'm doing right now, which is to stand up in front of a room, people, and talk and command the meeting, learn how to do it. But if you don't know how to do it and your meeting has come up, hire somebody to do it internally, externally, or whatever. So we're trying to impart, giving a healthy bit of fear, but also impart a mindset that says, this is what it takes to be large and in charge, and this is what it takes. And one of the things I've discovered over time is we as people, you talked about us being people, want to be liked. So we'll let that guy own the meeting for a while, and he'll talk for 15 minutes. The problem is you're respecting him while he talks, but you're disrespecting the other people in the room who have to listen to this guy go on and on. So it is very much of a practitioner's book, I like to think.
Yeah, and I agree. Jim did a good job of keeping me focused on the practical, although I would put in a comment for myself that says that where I went was to get war stories of real meetings, what happened at real meetings. And we talked to dozens of project managers, and we used our networks on LinkedIn and elsewhere to say, hey, tell us the weirdest thing that's happened at one of your meetings and how it affected it, and how the project manager, if it was you or another project manager, how did they react to it? So we did ground this, and I was able to ground myself a little bit because although I am teaching at a university, I've been through hundreds and hundreds of meetings in my telecom company, where I started as an engineer and then ended up as an accidental project manager for the remaining 30 years of my career. So I've been through these. I know how bad they can be. Maybe at some point later in the conversation, Jim can actually reference the Boston Globe article that's come out to talk about, just the other day, that came out to talk about how bad meetings are in general.
Right.
You talk about the goblins, and I don't know what they all are, but there may be some reference there to exennials and millennials, and Janelle, or all of you, I guess, but Janelle primarily, right? How, as a leader of a PMO, do you handle this new way of thinking they're bringing?
Right. So I'll just put out there that in next year, we're going to have about 50% of the entire workforce is actually going to be made up of millennials. In 10 years, it'll be majority. And it's funny because everybody says, oh, millennials, they're the me generation. They're so difficult. Traditionalists said the same thing about boomers. Millennials don't want anything more than what even boomers or Xers wanted. But they do focus on three things that are very important to them. One is feedback. So feedback needs to be immediate and constant. One is experimentation. This is a generation that's very tired of the status quo. They see things differently, and they're going to ask you the hard questions. If it's not going to hurt your project or your company, let them experiment. You're really going to get them engaged and involved. And the last is that vision. So Jim and Rich talk about that in their book, about always showing the vision and having a sensory item to show the value of the project or where they're going. They need to see that vision and know that they're part of a bigger purpose.
And I love it. Jump in, if I may, on the millennial boomer thing. I'm a boomer. Rich is a boomer. My kids are millennials. I think they're great. Their friends are millennials. I think they're great. I don't buy into this intergenerational warfare that sometimes goes on at all. I back off from that. When I meet people at meetings, oh, the millennials are all on the phone. Well, you know what? Deal with it. They want to be communicated to a certain way. I went to a presentation here in Boston. A woman talked about what were the markers for different generations. For the baby boomers, it was the Kennedy assassination. For the millennials, it was 9/11. How do we process information? If we're boomers, we physically held a newspaper in our hand. How do millennials process information? It's like my son says, you guys gave us computers and phones. Why are you griping now that we use them? So just do it. Just work together, because resistance is futile. So I just think I work with millennials. I work with people who are quite a bit younger than me, and we get along fantastically, and they do their thing, and I work with them. There's never been any kerfuffle about that. So when people bring up intergenerational, I acknowledge it, but I won't play that game. I won't be part of it. I'm with Janelle all the way on that.
I agree too, and I can actually reference another book that I worked on. This one's called Bridging the Pm Competency Gap, and I know we're here to talk about our paperback book, but in this book, because we brought up generations, we have a whole section that talks about how different different generations learn and how they could gain competency, since the focus of this book is on bridging a competency gap. We've actually have 5 or 6 tables where we have all different aspects of those generations and just how to best meet their expectations. Very much akin to what Jim mentioned. What motivates them? What are some of their markers? What are some of their motivators? So that this could actually be used as an adjunct. When you think about meetings, should you tell everyone to put their phones away or not? And if so, how do you communicate that? So very, very interesting. And just in line with that, I saw an outstanding TED Talk by, and I cannot remember the person's name, but she's from Harvard Business School, and she went out to Google to consult with them. This is an outstanding video. It's about 10 minutes. It's about trust. And when she, not Google, Uber was in all kinds of trouble, and they needed consultation. She went out there, and one of the things she found was that people were, during meetings, so it does go back to our book, they were texting each other about the meeting at the meeting. And she thought that was absolutely unacceptable, and it was causing lack of trust and disrespect. And whatever generation it is, here I'm with Jim, right? Let's throw the generational dividers out. Let's make them dotted lines, not solid lines. She just said, we have to stop that. The meetings are not productive. So the phones go off at meetings because you're texting each other about the meeting at the meeting. No good.
And earlier today, just throw more thing in, a friend of both mine, himself and Rich, great. She's great. I'm going to sub for her in a class next week, and we talked about the materials that I'm going to go over. And I was saying, I could hear her typing on the other end. And I say, what do you think about that? And I know she was off somewhere typing. I thought, why is she doing this? Put the typewriter down or the computer down for 5 minutes. So it isn't generational necessarily. People have different attention spans, and she's multitasking like crazy. So that happens too.
Well, we can tell you guys are boomers because you said kerfuffle and typewriter.
And typewriter. Jim, when are you taking your hot air balloon back home?
Actually, who uses kerfuffle all the time is Judge Judy. My wife watches that, and she says kerfuffle all the time. And she says
she's not exactly a millennial.
We're getting the smoke signals from you guys on a delay from across country here from Boston to Phoenix with our communication channels going back to typewriters and smoke signals.
Right. Well,
that's what it is. That's what it is. It's not our age. It's just that we're talking from 1992.
That's right. Yes, exactly.
The younger kids have gone back to vinyl, so I guess we're going backwards in some respect, right?
Well, what's new is old, right? I mean, that's the cycle.
And there's an article in the Globe. There's a guy that still repairs typewriters. Some people still love him, and he can't go to business because he can't stop repairing typewriters from the 50s. So there you go.
We'll go down another divisive track here and say, a prior guest we had on was Elise Stevens, who does a Women in Project Management initiative every year where she recognizes 50-plus women every year and does a profile on them. Mm-hmm. And obviously we have Janelle here with us, who's a woman, who's a PM leader, right? So how does gender play into PMO? And what we didn't get, Janelle, kind of, what's your career track, right? How did you get to be a leader as a woman within a project management space?
Yeah, I think I just fell into it like most project managers do. I started in IT and I was doing help desk and managing projects. And I just realized that I really enjoyed the project aspect of my job. So I decided to take a full-time job in project management for clients. And then moved on to managing technology projects and took opportunities as they come. And with that came promotions, responsibilities, and being a leader in the org. So I would say for women in project management, and this is true of women all across the board, and also especially in IT, we tend to not want to go into leadership positions. And that's because we don't feel qualified, whereas my male counterpart, even if he thinks he's a quarter qualified, is going to apply for that role. So it helps a lot to have female mentors that are going to push you. I have great female mentors that tell me if you're not doing something that's terrifying, you're not growing. So I've had really good mentors along the way that have pushed me to do the things that I'm able to do today.
And there's a definite parallel here. I was just thinking of one of the things we mentioned in our book. Statistics show that men interrupt women far more than women interrupt men, especially at meetings. So I brought that up. I spoke at PMI New Hampshire, and I brought that up, and I said, guys, let's not do that. So for guys, we shouldn't be doing that. And for women, you shouldn't let us do that. Women need to learn how to, we have to police ourselves, the guys. We say, excuse me, I'm still speaking here. So that's statistically true, is we try to make sure that people are, that's the real practical nature of our book. Things you need, behaviors. How should you do things? What behaviors should you look for? Not only in others, but in ourselves, right? Rich and I aren't perfect. I find myself with meetings getting hijacked. I have to go back to my training, if you will, or maybe overstepping a younger person or woman because I'm an old guy and having to pull back and say, no, you don't do that. So that triggered that thought when Janelle was speaking.
And this goes to behavioral science, really, cognitive readiness and behavioral science. If you're self-aware, and emotional intelligence, I should add as well, right? Self-awareness is key. So if you know, hey, wait a minute, I know that statistically, doesn't mean I personally do it all the time, but if statistically men are interrupting women, leave a little bit of a space, be sensitive to a clearing of a throat or just a body language that says, I'd like to get in here. And just the fact that you're aware of that, either as a facilitator or as a speaker, makes a big deal. So just being self-aware, you might leave more of a pause. Just very subtle things like that can make a huge difference because someone steps up with an idea and they're heard, and that's the idea that saves the project.
You guys have given lots of great tips and insights from the book. What would you, as the author, say is kind of the key takeaway that you'd wish that people would take away from the book?
Go ahead, Rich. If you want to go first, and I'll jump in after that.
I'd say that the key takeaway is just manage project meetings as if they were mini projects. If you just apply the very same principles that you apply to your project to the meetings, including communicating who's supposed to be there, why, and when, you'd be surprised how much traction you get just from that one overarching thing. There's lots of little tips. That's why it's hard, because the book is full of lots of little things like watch yourself in terms of interruption. Here's how to deal with a tangent taker, and it's written from that practical perspective, thanks to Jim. But the overarching message is definitely manage your project meetings like they were projects. And oh, by the way, you've had the power all along.
I think that's true. And like a couple of notes, I mentioned this earlier, but it bears repeating: the large and in charge. If you don't run the meeting, the guy or gal with the biggest voice in the room will. They will hijack your meeting immediately. That's one thing that to say. The other one is don't worry about being liked. And by that, I don't mean be a jerk. But if you're standing there saying, well, I want him to like me, and this is true for men or for women, then you're going to worry about being liked more than respected or more than running the meeting. You've got to control it. And the third thing would be sweat the details. I mean, you'll say to somebody, you get everything set up for this big meeting. People come from all over the country or even all over the world. And you say, it's 100 Main Street. And they get to 100 Main Street and there are 35 buildings. And then when they finally find the building, then they've got to go through security and a video and stuff. And now instead of having a well-run meeting, you got a bunch of kind of angry people you have to mollify. So sweat the tiniest details. Who in the meeting has special dietary needs? Where are they coming from? Who's meeting them at the front desk? I always do a checklist. I'm sure Rich does too, to make sure that if people don't want to go through the checklist, I kind of make them go through the checklist, the meeting organizers, to make sure people show up, and if stuff goes wrong, then it does during it. But I think what I've said to Rich, and I think he agrees, if you're running this big meeting, it's a day, it's 2 days or whatever, and you botch it, they're going to say, and this guy is running my project. So I think It's important to be large and in charge. That's my sense.
Exactly.
Janelle, so you're not the author of the book, right? But you run a department. What about meetings, having heard what Jim and Rich just talked about, are some takeaways from you to, do you run into the same things that they're talking about?
Of course, we all have unsuccessful meetings, and I think setting those standards up front in terms of what you plan to accomplish. And they hit on a very important point that if you're a project manager, you cannot be somebody's friend. You're going to have to make hard decisions, hard calls, and escalations. So if you're wanting to be liked, project management is probably not your area of expertise.
Yeah.
Right.
You're bound to tick somebody off during a project.
And as Rich said the last time, Jim is very good at not being liked.
We like you for that.
The other kind of an underlying theme for everything you're saying there is something that's inherent within project management as well as risk management, right? You're trying to minimize the risk of a project or a meeting going bad or a project going bad. Janelle, as a PMO leader, how does risk management play into that role and all the projects your team does?
Right. For me, I think it's actually more than that, because I am in IT project management, and it also includes IT governance. So the whole compliance piece that goes along with what we do from an application development perspective. So when you're thinking about projects, you need to think about not just the project risk, but also your IT risk. And IT risk gets a bad rap in terms of IT is not specifically business risk, but it is. You need to know what all those application risks are. Applications exist to support the business. So you need to understand the business need to really be able to assess risk on an application. All companies should have a IT risk register. So every application, you know what the risks are going in. You can pull that for your project, and you shouldn't ignore those. You do so at your peril.
And I would imagine, Jim and Rich, it's similar. Jim, you mentioned checklists. What do you use as a tip or a technique to give readers or future readers of the book to try to minimize the risk for your project meetings?
I think it's those things, those sweating the details type of things. And also, it might seem paradoxical, but I was thinking when Janelle was speaking about how we're not dogmatic about it. The person I learned facilitation from, and by the way, I have a good facilitator if you're going to do this, she would not routinely, but several times in the dozen or so projects we did together, tear the agenda up and say, well, we're going down a different path now because of X, Y, and Z. So I think it's just like the PIN box says, it's the careful planning. Then the execution becomes easier, and the willingness to be flexible helps a lot, goes a long way. I think all the other things we talked about, but I think it's that preparation. That's my thought.
Right. And in our book, we actually refer to a talk that was very inspiring to me by a gentleman named Jack Duggan. I don't know if any of you have seen him speak. He's pretty prominent at some PMI conferences. And he had a talk called Managing the Dance. Think, design, not plan. He makes a very interesting distinction between plan and planning. The word plan is static. The word planning is ongoing. And so just to Jim's point, you may have a great plan for how this meeting is supposed to work, and then you realize that the VP is not showing up, or that a senior VP or the CEO is actually going to be at your meeting. They don't announce it. They just, you find out 10 minutes before they're coming. You should be able to roll with that. So you can have a plan, but you should be planning. It's ongoing. And just the simple change of the word from static, plan, which is a noun, to planning, which is kind of verby, it makes a difference. So we actually have a subchapter called Planning Makes a Difference, and that's how you mitigate risk. You have a plan, but you're ready to replan.
Well, I love it. It's been a great show today. Hard to believe that we're coming up on the top of the hour. But it's International Project Management Day, and I think we did justice to the day by having some great conversations about PMO leadership and, of course, the book, How to Facilitate Productive Project Planning Meetings by Jim and Rich. So I'm going to give you guys each an opportunity, and Janelle as well. I didn't mean to say guys as all-encompassing as we talked about gender diversity earlier. An opportunity to let folks and listeners know how they can get in touch with you or what you have upcoming. So, Rich, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I'll actually talk about the recent past. So I was really thrilled to have a chance to be the keynote speaker on the topic of sustainability in PM, another passion of mine. And so that's always top on my list in terms of what to look to me for. I'm working here at Boston University as a senior lecturer and trying to weave sustainability thinking, as Janelle said, value and benefit production into all the classes here, and actually differentiate Boston University in that way by having our courses much more focused on value delivery and much less focused on, although we have to cover it, time, scope, and cost management. So you can find out a lot more, much more than you ever would need to know, simply by going to about.me, or if you're in Canada, about.me /Rich Maltzman, all one word. It's two words, but it's all one word in the link, about.me /Rich Maltzman. There's a video there on sustainability, and there's some other information with which you can read about the books that I've worked on with folks like Jim and my friend Loredana Abramo. So with that, I'll stop and hand off to Jim.
So first of all, Joe, thanks much. Janelle, great to virtually meet you. Jim Stewart, J. Stewart at jpstewartassociates.com. I just recently did a project summit here in the Boston area as a one-day workshop teaching Scrum. And I guess if I have anything upcoming, it's not a specific thing. It's kind of winding the year down. This is probably the last thing that I'm doing for this year in terms of public speaking. But I think if you find me anywhere, you'll find me out there doing partnering with a woman, this friend that I mentioned before, that both Rich and I know, and we're teaming up. She's already doing an agile transformation at a healthcare company, and our goal is to go expand there and just spend a lot of time doing agile transformations for companies, and for those that want it, or doing pilots for them. That's where I hope to spend 2020 and then beyond.
Well, thank you both for joining us from Boston, and of course, Janelle as well. Thanks for being here in studio. How can folks get in touch with you?
Thanks for having me. It's been great. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Janelle Lee PMP, and you can learn more about my charitable organization at maggiesplace.org.
Yeah, thanks so much for prioritizing us appropriately on where we should be putting our $2, and not into Mookie Betts' contract extension, but into people who actually have a need. So thank you. And thanks, of course, to all of our listeners. We appreciate you tuning in the first and third Thursdays of each month. Our next show will be Thursday, November 21st. We're going to have Lisa Levy and Stacy Sellier with us. And of course, we have a great lineup of guests coming up for the remainder of this year and booked into next year as well. Also, since it is International Project Management Day today, a reminder to go out to IIL.com and register for that conference. If you are a veteran, active duty service member, or military spouse, you can register for free using code VPMMA. And that conference runs for 3 months, so you have an opportunity to consume up to 26 PDUs worth of content, which is fantastic. Also, a reminder that these shows are recorded, so please be sure to subscribe to Project Management Office Hours on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Google Play, whatever your podcast platform of choice may be. And, of course, thank you to our sponsor, the PMO Squad. Visit www.thepmosquad.com to learn more about the purpose-driven PMO and all of their project management services. So that's it for now. Office hours are closed. Until next time, I'm PMO Joe, and you've been listening to Project Management Office Hours.